Nutrition and environment racism and climate catastrophe and the safeness and transport difference in that back end or culturally something that's in close Berlin and all of the social categories of there's a unique characteristics that happens all commodity production the process of production has produced transportation of capital the process of middle class capitalism sets enough differences in the ways of systematic production creates the best in the whole assuming the prisons of aspiration solidarity and the break of beer and Western heritage and American alternative ontologies and political as the neurojournalism, regular Robinsonia method of inspiration with the powerful piece of this requires the property either either to radical history tribute academics instead of
Does that mean that all law is
assumption that is an extreme
law of carbon dioxide emissions? It's not going to be half. It says it's illegal.
Yeah. Same kind of climate engagement. It's not what policy problematic. First step is capital principles social structural.
Just like capable of trade regulatory mechanisms.
There can be clear that
Yeah. There we go.
Travel. One email at a time. That's about the speed of the
Yeah, right. You need to debate coaching is actually just sending a bunch of emails all the time. Right?
Okay. I can actually do it
All day, every day. Yeah.
The WTO conceded that the Office of Union Reform to the WTO creates a structure where small nations can challenge large ones, which legally embeds precedents in favor of small nations. Society trades the key internally to all of the keys recommitted to the WTO. The all is legalized like gambling laws is not competitive now. The critique of value and arguments of the plan, technical alternatives, predictability, and and alternative to feeling holistic way of value for questions plans fills up and creates political strategies technology to create policies to act writing policy meetings to reread 14 evidence of society situations that go agenda about the witness and social administration or the global trade government collective action average lead to inclusive and article discuss why that can with the better for the organization of lasting practical decision mobilization because the strong facts of the last and because many are unable to monitor on way of day-to-day writing policy meetings of group practices and real civilians institutional facility annual trade policy should be reasonable to see no the appropriate day-to-day monitoring the post on domestic orange as proven as democratic control of government decisions that appeal to normalization and trade policies with permanent coordination targeted by all and developing expertise in trade policy and right and when democratic legitimacy are firm produces simulated legal base or crucial for social transformation they are never even if we don't come up with panels yet clear come on the combination of the lawyer can action moral political condition legal order legal way to the head to play the lawyer to keep your legal unstated and necessity legal possess the use of legal matters and analytic ways or faculty or the act of legal training sensitive to complexity and the proper lawyers on the take a venture on the legal law to be legal theory and even the judicial fair legal cases legal contribution social justification a book with the economic community market mobilizing the moral political claims mark political claims case outweighs one trade tax quote useful about economic inequality the also on the other full system which is assuming structurally that's not effectively seeing revolutionary challenge to the system of oppression between the all lane one of the comprehension change both from the system most of the information policy enables us to rethink politics, international trade, equal frontiers, and manipulate it. And there is no legal definition of the policy, international trade, actually, the back of the trade, and characteristics of the trade, not to the analysis of reform does political remembers to take up and re-entering the policies and the foreground and the current table altering actively the world shutting dogs and the academic and the activity the policy between the accessing the practice the activity according to the political ethics and democracy compromise to the lack of technical expertise reformers must maintain explicit focus on technical with a detailed analysis of trade policy in order to actualize change movement and fail without respecting the trade policy because there's too focused on broad claims and not strategy details as to bring the evidence above. Now, the environmental justice critique fermentation to the acting alternative critique of global inequalities and overcome the wanting to see and incentive reason why the alternative is ultimately lies in online gambling is a reason of affirmative don't allow the law to consume the app makes tweets documents impossible because it makes negative and moving target means that we can never pin the advocacy law to or we can generate offense you already got 9 minutes of offense the alternative don't take that away from us the app it's a single minute critique of environmental justice creates a bottom-up approach which solves the technocratic thinking at the federal level that's explicitly stated in the beginning evidence all under regulation all the regulations we have to develop by every citizen using prediction markets to have a voice for that's needed evidence which means that all other evidence which assumes that we are technocratic federal approach it's not correct policy relevant propositions or conditions change the use of the environment in tier 5 the public can never be on the part of the agenda of the environmental philosophy concerned with the more pressing question the ontology instead of providing a framework for evaluating policies environmental philosophers prefer to focus on this failure the least of the value the value concerns how to explain the environmental philosophy to have a significant impact on the public and private institutions this has produced unfortunate consequences and the more concrete social action are after the best solution allows bottom-up regulations that are implemented at the state level that's the only way to solve their call to abandon the state as an institution for reform fails Monbiot hey stopping runaway climate change was precedent over than the other and there's very little time to winnow the opportunity we have 2 degrees of warming and closing very fast we have to use all the resources and these must include both governance corporation runaway climate change the massive political and economic impacts government corporations currently control both money and power unless we have managed to mobilize them. We stand a snowball chance and climate health stopping the clock in the biosphere. We must overthrow all the political structures and replace them in a couple of months. This is the magical thinking in the most modern and the desperate kind of the executive of Exxon how Rebuttal to the posturing and proves provides marvelous distraction to the choice between the government and the no government. The choice between the government and the mafia. State solutions are key. We'll answer the 1 and C Dorsey evidence here. They first have to prove that we're a bad reform before they can just throw out the entirety of the affirmative. The all can't spill up individual environmentalism fails Kumo. 11 individual and household production. The pollution effective only if it's deep and widespread and only if they're accompanied by meta-level policies seem unlikely to emerge without significant support from below. It would get tragic. Disempowerment fueled by the great mass of thing and magnify the political ineffectiveness by making it more attractive than change of them rather than investing time in the changes at higher levels and ethically motivated minority in the act while carrying the courageous creation of political well-being and insufficiency problem reduced by those who care about social climate justice challenge their mitigation efforts to influence the higher levels with whom carry out the significant effects on the emission levels and the matters of social justice. Conditionality is a voting issue under 2 weeks strategy allows them to critically kick the critique leader in the debate. The ultimate microcritical move toward the politics of discourse skills and skill grounding for resistance cloud. 6 theories of offering metaphors from the agencies fill up the micropolitical techniques and reducing the microstrategy of the discourse of interpretation not like anything collecting the political movement consequently any dialectical tension between the real social relations and consciousness is impossible. There is no real ground for the resistance century to leave us a powerless politics of the advocacy in favor of discourse less any concrete aims to rebel the people and celebrate peace that leaves them where they were before. Overwhelming empirics are on our side. Their alternative just creates a palliative where you can feel radical while keeping legal power in the hands of the violent prohibitionists who intend the European election the largest transnational vote in the heralded a continent where to the right and the disconnect between leaving the power in the hands of the right and the radical too often celebrate the ethical divide individual and the expect the wider representational power that leads the radicals and put in new forms of protest individualizing the personal. There's no attempt to build a collective movement. The 3 articles suicide demonstrating personal segments the awareness the shun the ethics the reflect a lack of the willingness to seize power and will not go away the left and the adopt the awareness the alternative ethical lifestyles the subordination of the same the post practice implosion and the salient point here to the ethical individuals is reflecting the conservative forces in society today. Economic development is trade is a complex oppressor and fearful evidence from multiple sides controlling for every variable proves which means the alternative cannot resolve trade then you should immediately vote affirmative because it outweighs all other impacts. There's no distinguishment between the impacts and the 1 and C. That's the Gartsky evidence. Economic development is the most significant. Actually advocating retreat from the globalization of the WTO makes global inequality worse and dispute resolution impossible. Reforming the enforcement mechanism of the WTO is a key starting point for positive change. Lipsy in 6 the WTO the benefit of the smaller less powerful nation. No feasible alternatives have been set to the need to analyze the globalization. The WTO protesters cannot roll back the far-reaching changes in globalization that they enable should the WTO be abolished. No, the WTO is the best hope for those in the oppressed and the lawless world where the powerful behave as they wish. The WTO is a dispute settlement function which heard more than 300 cases in the developed in the world. Listen, the G22 complaints and then agreeing the negotiations would have been inconceivable without the WTO, but it is important to be hindered by the disparities. This is a defect with the dispute settlement mechanism. Its accomplishment is discarded because the imperfect and unfortunate would be unfortunate. Reform is needed instead. Don't the rich countries exert too much power. No doubt, but at least the meetings provide a forum for poor nations to speak out. The alternative, no voice and no real system, will be much worse. The WTO is an institution one that needs reform, not abolition. And until a better rules-based system is developed, we need support. We need support in which we have one. And wholesale resistance against the WTO fails, which the alternative is by not embracing a federal level legal changes. Only the engagement with practical reforms cause the status quo and equality. Mafia. 3. The WTO is correct to co-opt and capture the institution. Every time we shout the WTO has to go, we join hands with George Bush. He wants to destroy because they impedes the plans for the direct U.S. control of the other nations' economies. The WTO's democratic structure. This man bypass this monkey's change, but to call for the destruction and like calling for dissolution of the crowd and parliament in favor of the monarchy is to shoot the unilateralism of multilateralism. Our key task is to assist the poor nation, all of the and the power and the rest and no doubt the rules and the WTO force. The nation to prevent protectionism by the rest nation, market nations, the law is key to sustaining reforms, incremental changes, using the likelihood of whole-scale upheavals and serve as victories. Their scholars make critical misunderstandings about minority needs. Delgado. 9. Critique of the piecemeal reforms, the imperialistic is wrong and court order the pretentious first the possible heat and heat the poor here and toward the sparks of paternalism. Assert the possibility of the revolution later outwitted the heat. Now indeed the incremental change of the bringing out revolutionary small reforms and the appetite for further combat the CLS scholars and dualism argues that the principles of impediments or intellectual break the mental chains. That card is Marcus Champ. I'll send those out.
Where'd you mark it, Abe?
Chains.
Okay. It should be good now.
Make it happen.
I got one. Let me get the other one. Okay, cool.
All right, ready?
Mhm.
Right. Start with clear evidence. Indicates that we need to have a new legal knowledge and new legal theories. What is the new legal knowledge and new legal theories that you propose?
Well, first of all, the delivery evidence is very clear that we're a shift away from the status quo legal structures or the legal approaches to the WTO, which have
How?
always either been entrenched in the
How?
federal government or they've been straw fires like the battle in Seattle, like Occupy. They haven't actually had a way to challenge day-to-day
I agree.
grind.
What is the new
we're a
legal
shift
theory
from
that you indicate?
Second, the clear evidence isn't necessarily about wholesale new legal theories. It's about a way in which we approach legal solutions.
Yes, my question is, you have yet to answer my question. My
Right,
question
I
is,
think I already
what do you
answered it.
do? No, you haven't.
The
Explain.
clear evidence is about embracing a different kind of ethics when we look at legal questions. The 1AC does that by looking at the WTO and seeing which reforms
So
would be
looking
the
at the
best reforms.
WTO is the new legal theory that you are advancing.
The delivery evidence is very clear that that's what we need to have in the
I
status
think
Okay,
you're like
cool.
giving too much power to this like one random sentence that says new
No,
legal
that
theories.
card
The
is
rest
really good. It indicates that.
It's about advancing litigation and like suing people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like it's about in literal legal strategy.
Okay, cool. We'll get to that.
That's
Your
pretty good.
legal evidence. Actually, let's go back. Who is the right?
Who is the right?
Yeah, you say the KU sees policies to the right. Who is the right?
Oh, that evidence is talking about like very hardcore conservatives that
Like?
would do things like roll back all EPA regulations, that would do awful things to the environment, that are funded by ExxonMobil. Like that's what our Monbiot evidence
Okay,
is talking
why
about.
wouldn't they roll back the AF then under that world?
Because the prediction markets, well, you conceded an internal link claim that the prediction markets cause internalization of environmental collapse by
Does the right
government,
have the
which
power
means
now?
that- yes, which is why the app changes it.
Okay, cool. Who has the power in the roles of the AF then if you take it back from the right?
Okay, well, I think that there's two different claims. A is that, yes, negative environmental legislation is being passed now. B is that the alternative just adds further fuel than that by taking out any kind of resistance to that in political structures.
You take out resistance, so you're telling me that the
No,
right is
I'm
just going to
saying
chill
this
back
is-
and like,
sorry,
oh,
this
these
is what the
these
alternative
college
does.
debaters said that we should legalize the AF, so now I'm just going to sit back and let them do them. That's how that legal theory works now?
Okay, well, I was answering a question about what the alternative does vis-a-vis
No,
the
I'm
government.
talking
What
about the AF now.
does
What does the
vis-a-vis
AF
government,
do?
Our internal link claim is that prediction markets would cause a massive amount of information that clearly shows that the entire public would like legal reforms based off of environmental
You think that people
sustainability.
haven't? So we read this Dorsey evidence indicates that black people have been shouting for this for years. So you think that two white people talking about it now means that everybody jumps on board?
We think
Okay,
that
well,
prediction markets create a hedging mechanism so corporations have an incentive to go along with
So
this.
it's about the corporations. Thank you.
I mean, that's a second determined
Right.
argument.
Yeah.
The first one is what I've already said.
clarification question. Only permutation with the permutation due to the alpha and the decay, right?
Mhm.
Okay. What was it, too?
Theory was condo and floating fix. It's like,
I don't know.
no, floating fix. Oh, restoration. Don't check. You should also look at there's a big class that you can look and just pull them all.
Okay.
Okay. We have 6:05 left.
Didn't you use a little bit before the cross X?
No.
No, that was just us.
That was just like
emailing
jumping
it.
up. Okay, yeah, I didn't realize that. Okay, 6:05. The paperless like damn time.
Everybody should be in the email chain now, right? Should be good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I messed it up again, but it's.
Yeah, because everybody got those 2 cards, so we sent that out to Tracy.
It's gonna be Black Marxism. There's an overview at the top. Here we go. Quan indicates we cannot concede conceptions of like to the state, which is that the AF does when they call for a legalization process. Only democratic anarchism can solve the four components necessary to create a new order. First is a deconstruction of white supremacy and racial capitalism. All the links prove the AF uphold the structures, whereas the negs, resolution of the links allows for us to work towards deconstructing the ways that these structures function. We need to understand that every action we take in policy formation functions within both racism and capitalism. Failure of the AF to explicitly challenge the structures perpetuates them. Second is to map the genealogy of black movements, which clearly does not happen in the AF. Even if you think they're winning a risk of somehow challenging capitalism, the lack of their explanation of ways of how racialized bodies are affected by structures or their challenge to structures short circuits the AF solvency. Now third is reconstruction of the historical practice of socialism. Historical context is key to understanding how to move forward. Reconstructing past theories within their context doesn't happen in the world of the AF because they assume a context of the hegemonic United States instead of understanding differing historical contexts and the effects of decisions on other populations. This is shown by their failure to be able to understand that there are things that can exist outside of things like trade institutions or the way that multilateral institutions law for regulations. Now fourth is conceptualization of blackness as ontology, which is a conceded point from quantum evidence in the 218. Now the AF believe that the U.S. legalization process can solve for racialized bodies proves a flawed starting point. Only understanding the way that structures position bodies and dictate ontologies allows for us to actually solve instances of structural violence. Democratic anarchism delegitimizes state leadership as the sole authority, which is key to contextualize history, resolve the necessary components for the creation of a new conception of society. The alternative can lead to international changes, but understanding how racial capitalism made it possible for Antigua to be excluded from WTO decisions in the first place has to come first. This also turns the AF because it means that without solving for structures via the 4 steps outlined above, all the impacts of the AF will just be recreated. Now she said framework 1 and C says roll the ballot is for you too. Those who team the best with those with fluidity, whiteness, this has to come first. We are also meeting their interpretation of links that are germane to the AF, which is the reason why you should default to our link analysis. We are better for education because we have to defend. They should have to defend why their AF is a good idea and why their justifications are actually able to resolve their impacts. Is why we're always going to be a prerequisite. She says plain spells up. This is going to be key because this card is not about grassroots movements, but rather about how the U.S. spills over to the WTO, not about how social movements affect the government. Even if you think that there is some risk of them being in some sort of social movement that spills up, there's no way to solve the alternative because they still rely on things like WTO regulations. They rely on things like WTO regulations, which rely on the status quo system of authority that exists now. She says, Claire, I'm going to extend the legalism link here. That's the 1 and C Leong evidence, which is going to be key because it makes a link claim about the way that property functions as well as the way that legalism functions. Leong's analysis connects whiteness and notions of property. Whiteness allowed for ownership, but also became exclusive with becoming property. Property in the world of the AF is defined independent racialization, which ignores away that whiteness allowed for only white individuals to create the boundaries of property, and then subsequently police and property became constituted by what was and was not white, which means there's no way for the to shift and understanding property without explicitly addressing their role of race in their original analysis. Black bodies become the objects that are gambled with by white bodies because there's no challenge to the way that property is defined in the status quo. Leong also applies this to a question of the law. The AF's use of the law allows for those to property to be recreated because privilege is still structured within institutions. Legal reforms assume that the state can create and police value in this relation to property, which exasperates exclusion because the white institutions are still run by whites who are exclusive with property definitions. Leong also says that the reason why these structures are preserved is because working through the law prevents white people from having to acknowledge their own privilege, so white people can advocate for legal online gambling because of people in Antigua and never have to come to terms with the way that law props up hierarchical values of capitalism and other structures, the way that those functions, which is why we are always going to be a prerequisite understanding the way that the law works on oppressed bodies. Like the overview is going to prove why the case isn't solved. Must when you read a specific link to their claims about global trade and inequality here. The firm's focus on economic growth, prioritization, and lack of slavery that enabled racism in the first place. Wendell Berry 2. The root of racial bondage order designed to be superior to subjugation of people we can just wipe out the South African blacks. Promise to free obligation to ownership. They were economically valuable militarily weak beside the blush inferior to order to persuade ourselves to be all to enslave them. This suggested by treatment of their social exclusive weak side labor, child anarchy, or really started the racial race experience to be sizing so social prejudice turns rednecks hillbillies form because they do not do and may hold up your head in place side with public light in your mouth of the people's money in your pocket and blood in your hands not swat of hand or modern issues. The problem of race treaties that can be solved merely creating more blacks than the racial minorities college than high paying jobs. This is to assume that we can solve the problem of racial minorities by elevating the full partnerships of problems racial minorities. The larger problem is they thought of no better way to solve the race problem. This does not solve this only assumes American blacks made better some use why becoming greedy as affluent whites. This assumes that the standards of oppression become the aims of the standards of the precedent evils. Survivors test liberations. This is going to be a key answer to their argument that they can just allow for the weaker countries to be balanced with the stronger countries. This is what this card is indicting, because you cannot just make black people like white people. You have to understand the way the structures have positioned them like that in the first place. Now, the link evidence just says that concrete action is key. We are still able to access now. Group next to arguments about case we still able to solve because we left for cooperation. That was the work that's already done. In the overview, the Eagleton evidence assumes that we need to reshape norms and not replace them. It also assumes that we need institutions or trade instead of being able to use cooperation. I'm going to explain the link or the alternative here. The all allows for the aspirations of the mass by rejection was perceived as rational status quo anarchism, as free from Western understanding leads to the development of alternative ontologies for a rejection of Western epistemology and metaphysical foundations. This shift in foundational understanding of society is key to creating new spaces of understanding and body knowledge. Because the central focus, because it empowers agents against the state and capital, which are co-constitutive forces. This shift of the all is key to preserving ontological totality, which is separate from the status quo system, which Quansize has never allowed for property to ontologically exist because of established authority in relation to intellectual loyalties. As long as there is authority, there will inevitably be hierarchies. The alternative examines Western intellectual traditions in order to challenge the paradigmatic construction of leadership as a basis of social order. The democratic aspect of the all considers the historical context necessary to decode the past and apply it to the future that we can create. That means we are able to create international cooperation with the status quo without the status quo problematic framework that is dependent on authority. Quansize is key to agency, which makes it superior to the act. Even if they win the WTO, is key to solve something before we're able to access this. We have to have agency to make decisions outside hierarchies. This is not something that's granted to bodies that are considered ontological property in the status quo. Now that also answers all for our arguments on why we are abroad. Claim. Now skip the permanent theory debate. Go to McGinnis. Jesus, McGinnis, I'm going to send the online gambling links here. This is the one, there's a couple arguments. First is that gambling requires a privileged position. You have to be an authority figure to have the time and energy and resources to play with money, which means that oppressed bodies can't access the structural activity of online gambling. That's the reason they uphold the structures, because they create more commodified leisure for privileged individuals without addressing the structural oppression of those most affected by the play of resources. Now, second is the cause grade evidence from the one and see online gambling is based on consumerist mindset that expands the market. The F legitimizes gambling in order to manage consumption and govern the individual. That upholds the consumer structure of capitalism. No, two easy arguments as to why online gambling is not capitalism. Means you default to this link analysis now. I'm not gonna read that. Next is mentioned the Dorsey evidence from the one and see is going to answer this. Dorsey is specific as how racialized communities are the most affected by climate change to have the least impact on solutions to climate change. Black communities are responsible for U.S. non-compliance with the WTO, but I also are the ones facing this multiple consequences. Dorsey indicates that understanding structures is a prerequisite to creating legislation. The status quo is problematic because it does not assume grassroots movements. Democratic anarchism allows us to create solutions to things like climate change, but to do it without regulating authority figures that dictate what happens in marginalized communities. Dorsey specifically indicts multilateral attempts at policies to solve environmental degradation because it does not assume things like environmental racism. This is why the embodied knowledge that the alt centers on is going to be a key analysis. Now she says, Mom, at the back end evidence from the one and C is going to answer back. This is the state link, which says there's a mutual dependency of the state and capitalism. Which means that using the state can never break down the nature of capitalism. The state will just regulate legal online gambling to prevent any sort of solvency for the app, which means this is going to turn the one and C back and indicates that the state nullifies differences in order to produce labor, which allows for exploitation to become invisible, but also reified, which means that there will just be regulations to still not giving people what they want, to still not comply with the WTO, even if on face it looks like something that is being done now. The body evidence also assumes that there is no alternative to the state. We indicate that this removal of authority figures will solve for this. All the links are going to prove why the reforms are going to prove why the reforms of the one AC are never actually able to solve that. The analysis already that I also think their impact claims are going to be key in the context of the bacon card from the one and C, which indicates that race is the central axis of power that functions in relation to economic exploitation, but not exclusively controlled by it. Surplus production is important to explain capitalism, but surplus distribution is also a central factor of economic theory that can only be explained by the role of race. The drive for commodity production is what allows for capitalist exploitation because it relies on the production of services. The aspect of the theory assumes that different types of human needs different types of human difference in order to be perpetuated. And I'm going to read another online gambling link here. McCain and 9. Discourse surrounding the online gambling epidemic line and the hyperbolic metaphors to claim dynamics of the internet, citizen gambling, culture, practice, strategies, implement centers of online gambling are addicted to the complex citizenship to use cultural ideology, policies, or regulation of leisure. Opposing categories of gambling are polarized, traditional masculinity serves as a norm, political discourse is gendered, language is naturalized. Look at that, naturalized. Oh.
I'm gonna move so that I can see.
Which was naturalized.
Okay, in your explanation of the alternative, you say as long as there's a Western ontology or like a framework of the affirmative, there will always be hierarchies. How does the alternative overcome that?
Conflation, but yeah, we indicate that as long as there's like authority figures that exist, that necessitates a hierarchy, right? Because you have to have someone to be in charge of or to have power over.
Embraces democratic anarchism get rid of all authorities? Like, I understand that you embrace that, but all of your internal link claims are about grassroots movements. Why does, like, Obama just give up his power?
Right. Well, there's so many levels to this. The way that the grassroots movements function means that we're able to create that lack of authority, so you're no longer held accountable to things like the state, right? You can have collective and cooperative ways to exist
All right,
without
what does your
authority
grassroots
figures in
movement
general.
look like?
What do you mean, what does it look like?
Like, what is it, Occupy Wall Street? Is it Battle in Seattle? Like, who participates?
No,
is there
actually,
an organizational
the quantum
structure?
the 1NC is very specific as to how it's a movement that's different from anything that's happened in the status quo, because it's not our current understandings
All right,
of
so
democracy
something
or our
different
current
that
understandings
definitely
of
solves,
anarchy.
but we're not sure what it looks like.
No.
And it definitely overthrows the entire government.
The way that it functions is how I already explained to you, that it allows for, instead of having authority figures that do things like regulate how we interact with others,
also-
we really have communal and cooperative understandings of
I also
how we
think
interact
your
with
like
people.
sarcastic tone of it is really indicative of the quantum evidence that indicates that we are so ingrained in the logic of what it looks now that we cannot perceive a world outside of that. That
Okay,
when we
I'm
are
just-
stuck in that logic, we allow
So,
for the system, like the
I'm just
civilization of
trying to
capitalism
get
to
you
be
all, which
upheld.
like you
So,
appear
yes,
to
make
know
fun,
what
but
the
you keep linking
alternative would
yourself.
look like, but there's no explanation.
I
of,
think
like,
we just
what it
gave you an
actually does.
explanation.
I also think it's key to recognize the way that the what Kwan calls the totality of ontology functions. So that links back to the Leong evidence that I did at the top of the 1NC, which says that in the status quo, racialized bodies are considered property, which removes ontology because property cannot have ontology.
Okay.
So that restoration of ontology is also a prerequisite to understanding the way that this movement would quote unquote look like or how it would function.
Just to clarify, the alt doesn't do any of the affirmative. It does not legalize online gambling.
The alt does not legalize online gambling.
Okay, does it interact with the WTO at all?
Well, that's like a tricky question. We say that there is not like a regulating institution internationally, but
So
we
the
say that
W-
there still can be like international interactions and international cooperation.
Okay, so there can be trade, but there can't be a WTO.
Functionally.
Okay. The Dorsey evidence says that grassroots movements spill up to legislation. You did a pretty good job explaining that, but it doesn't seem
Thank
to
you.
assume a democratic anarchism that the alternative is. It's actually
Oh no,
talking
it
about
actually
the
really does. Yeah, no,
legislative-
Dorsey is on point. It says that when we have multilateral institutions that don't assume embodied knowledge,
I
which
agree
Kwan
that
says is what we
critiques
need to
multilateral
center in
institutions.
democratic anarchism, that's what allows for regulation that doesn't assume the
But
people most
The
affected.
second half of the Dorsey card seems to indicate that status quo legislation and status quo structures can't solve as long as it takes into account embodied knowledge.
You're just wrong about
Okay.
that. I'm gonna send this to you.
Ooh, sorry.
So it's gonna be the theory stuff and oh no, wrong. The theory. So it's gonna be the float and pick, permutation and conduct. So like the order it came in.
Okay.
Theory then firm.
I'm sorry.
Theory then firm.
Yes.
Theory, perm theory.
But if it's easier for you, I can just put all the theory on. It's yeah. Just tell me what you want.
I'm just pulling black straight down.
Okay.
I think you do what you need to do.
That's, yeah.
That's actually what I
Yeah.
decided.
All right.
I agree.
I used to try to like, I'll leave 4 inches of space here.
Firm.
Not gonna work out.
Yeah, no.
Then I'd be like, I've got 19
Oh,
hours.
dear.
Like, well,
Sorry.
that's dumb.
What?
I didn't know about it anyway.
Yeah.
I think your stuff is next saved already, Megan.
Bird.
Okay. Okay, you ready? Cool. They say flow impacts by first that there's we were in a flow impact. We already indicated that we will be able to resolve the environmental racism part in crossing seconds that the links all of the links prove the reason why we don't do the one they see second third is that all of your it's also going to become the reason why you don't get a permutation because we indicate that you're the form is still in the alternative now we're better for education forced to end up in a discussion about the process of legalization, the way in which we engage in legalization, how structures operates we indicate that the starting point is going to be key when discussing these things. We choose that the pathological view of the 1AC and the 1AC are different. The reason why we are not a full flow impact also our specific counter ski is better for education that is not assumed by any of their offense, which is why all of them by their offense. Now we need all of their predictability types because they wrote the plain text, which means that they have to be forced to defend the entirety of the plain text and only that. Now I'm going to go for their clean evidence. The reason why you vote negative from the you vote negative indicates that in order for you to be able to create new legal theories and new legal knowledge, so you have to leave the line of the card, which obviously is not highlighted, indicates that you have to leave the legal system. You have to leave the illegal systems and move to grassroots movements. If that is true, it's the reason why our alternative is better is able to be able to engage in the discussions of how the WTO is operating and operates in status quo to be able to create new legal theory outside of that knowledge production. Also, our Dorsey evidence is also backs up by indicating that our use of grassroots movements is going to be necessary to be having discussions of the law and legal theory when it comes to things like the WTO and things like environmental degradation. The reason why you are not with the Dorsey evidence, but the alternative is able to resolve what you have isolated now permutation based. Only permutation they go for is permutation depot, which means that any risk of the link means that you don't get them permutation first. That all of the links become decisive to the permutation. Our the cost group in the case of gambling is really interested in logical commodification and consumption, which will come from consumption of bodies, philosopher bodies and communities to be governed. It indicates that there is no defense of consumption and the 2AC, which means that the logic of the 1AC is one that's always flawed and will always fail. This leads to a form of serious policy failure because they indicate that you allow for the law to be able to perfect itself without never having to change think about the way in which the structures operate to allow for things like to allow for capitalism to continue. Now the property decide permutations attempt at the property they try to claim our strategies as their own, which turns the case permutations institutional capitalism that for white prophet. That's Leon 12. A white man posting a Craigslist explaining that and he wants to make black French political crime figure accused of racial indifference and casually refers to the racial capitalism of these incidents or false racial capitalism, the process of indirect racial the white individual and the dry social economic value from the associated with non-white racial identities in society preoccupied with diversity. White rights are valued. Society founded within capitalism, the British history of slavery that demonstrates that non-whites are used of racial diversity, social good, who is signifies the inclusion of non-white individuals, using the affiliation with the non-white individuals, and thus become white individuals and predominantly white institutions that require social and economic benefits while deflecting so privilege and avoiding more difficult questions of racial equality. Now now the young evidence also the reason why you don't get the permutation of the law as is in the status quo is one that allows to be owned by white individuals without questioning the way in which you are situated in society and how you perpetuate the capitalist mindset of consumption. This leads us from a severance. This is the debate about starting points of political violence, which is the reason why you don't get a permit, which we indicate is bad because that's impacted by the rubrically indicates that illicit uses to the divergent voices to be from a permutation. The reason why you now commodification just had permutation commodifies senses to rectify the racial relation which turns the effective practice that's Leon 12 legal diversity white intended to produce progress has intended contributed to the state of affairs and degradation non-whites by modifying that it regularly regulates the non-white individuals. Specifically does not benefit non-white individuals until those identities, social capital, the race capitalism works one of the darkest case areas in America's history. Racial capitalism is one of their focuses progress to practical level, both with the conflicting identity and harm to non-white individuals by displacing the anti-discrimination reform. We should therefore decline to engage in racial capitalism and should then instead develop the more improving racial relations and the value of non-whites is still largely measured by choices of the white people and the predominantly white institutions. Yeah. Now you're going to see the Brickley evidence is going to be the impact of the debate, the frames, the way in which you evaluate impacts in this debate. First, that indicates that whiteness is the form of neoliberalism and racism efforts to be excluded and to violate bodies indicates that whiteness is cannibalistic and the form to maintain the dominant white culture indicates that the capitalism is the resident's rule to regulate bodies and least systematic violence and things like extinction to happen, which means that the reason why your multilateral cooperation is one that always excludes things like Antigua is one that is rooted in the logic of capitalism, which means that our rejection and reframe of the way in which capitalism operates is able to resolve the impact of the AF now, kind of. one is LOL. It's the only thing that we read. There's nothing else that we could go for. Second is that there's no reason. It's not a reason why you reject the act, but you reject the team. Now, fuck no, this sad. Black Marxism is situated within a specific context, and the African judge just revised their already existing theory in the race Robinson 2K. The Marxism became a station area for the immersion of the tradition. Black Marxism was not a conversation between Marxism and tradition or revision, but it was a new vision and centered on the theory of cultural corruption of race and the cultural liberation that tradition crossed the familiar bounds of social and historical narrative. Cool.
We have 844. Is that what that quote says?
Yeah.
Do you need anything?
Just like proof.
Okay. I'll need you when you come back.
And you should bring that context which is
We're on the same page.
Okay. Do you need to do anything right now? No. Okay.
I'll probably be done pretty soon. Okay, so crap. I have 613 left.
Yep.
I'm just saving this. Okay. The order. Are we? Should.
Yeah, we don't want to get water.
Oh, okay. I'm just looking
We're
at the
missing two
screen.
debaters.
Oh no, I just. Oh, yeah.
One who's gonna give the 2 a.m.
Details.
Okay.
She might be
Details,
relevant.
yeah.
I know.
Details.
Yeah, right.
Well, this live stream is fancy. Like a timer on here and everything.
Oh, are you looking at it?
It had some
I just
problems
pulled it
at
up.
the beginning, but it's better now.
Oh, nice. Thank you for doing that.
My like entire high school team this year watching debates, and they're like emailing me like, "Where can I see where pairings are and stuff?" And I'm like, "I'm in the middle of debates.
Yeah,
know
right.
that. What are you doing?"
Right now.
Yeah.
Okay. The order is going to be the WTO advantage, the prediction markets advantage, and then the critique. I'm gonna try to go as straight down as I can.
I'm really gonna need you to read that again. I'm sorry, I was.
WTO advantage, prediction markets advantage, then the critique straight down.
Said you opened it up. No, you didn't.
No. My Microsoft Word is being, I don't know what. So, sorry. Can I
That's fine.
try to?
WTO predictions. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you saying new things on predictions or extension of 2AC stuff?
So I'm just gonna extend stuff. They're like.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is, are you saying things did not go to this piece of paper? Are you saying brand new things? Or
I'm just gonna extend the impact.
Okay. Just stay it on one.
Yeah, I'm doing it all on WTO.
Yeah.
Like you can do that too.
Okay, I don't.
Perfect. Just don't be afraid to use the phrase, now the K.
Alright, we good? Okay. There is no impact or comparison. The world of between the world of globalization and the world of the alternate vacancy, a piece of Gart's evidence, a piece of Griswold evidence, which indicates that the great solves war, which means it symbolizes Marxism and getting rid of all of capitalism. They've also seen the Bowles evidence, which indicates globalization actually is a rising tide to solve the inequality argument. Any new analysis in the 2NC, the Lipsy evidence from the end of the this because it indicates that absent the WTO, it's impossible to resolve these things because any of the predictions on the blockboard now are the kind of flash in the pan solution which never actually leads to any kind of long-term sustainable change. The long-term and can't access long-term conservatives just can't remake turns the case because it makes it impossible for alternatives to cooperate rather than trade with each other. The WTO that is better positioned for conservatives and powerful piece of cow evidence that to shift the jurisprudence which makes us to beat the United States and other countries by suspending that we're the only ones that give those that they can change international issues. They can't solve agents through the affirmative because they can't resolve that either. Mamba evidence indicates that mobile they love it when people is only collective action is able to actually harm them. We're able to solve it. They can see that the external even sharper evidence indicates that all of their markets are better, so which solves solves best the also they're just this is all as literally as climate change cooperation is the key to African American livelihoods. All of this ontology can't come first. Focusing on consequences, Norton 96 multiple bodies that have to do the great battles with ecologically communities, the community of inquiry scheme as well. Better understand our responsibility if we understand. Will survive if we achieve individual welfare. Those less bereft to further utilitarianism. Murray 97 and active responsibility commands acknowledge that the first between international results one chase after the ultimate responsibility is credited because responsibility is lacking the ethical responsibility could accommodate and limit disappointment the elections who suffer from the unwise action. What does speak down is good intention with disastrous results is more which is disastrous results is morally effective done. Their alternative spills up there and none of their alternative spills up, or if it does then the permutation obviously solves because they say they get rid of all hierarchy. There are cloud evidence indicates that their micropolitics can never coalesce around anything because it's entirely theorizing. The debris evidence and clear evidence both point to the necessity of actual legal strategies of constantly looking to the people of power. It's not about new legal reforms, which is the line that she keeps picking on. It's about actual strategies of litigation, policy proposals, etc., which means that we have a defense of our method wherein debates over the legalization, over the legality of trade regimes is better able to solve their radicalism is impotent, which is a Pew evidence. It seems to the right. It makes sense in the context of the affirmative because James Inhofe gets to make environmental policy in the United States, and the United States gets to be protectionist. The permutation is able to solve most of their law links. The vacancy of Delgado evidence, which indicates you can't just dispense with the law altogether because people of color are the ones that need are often the ones that need the most, i.e. subsidies for energy, welfare policies, etc. All reasons why the law might be bad in the abstract, but is not universally the same. The app is not the same thing as Plessy Burns Ferguson, which is what all of their evidence, is about. And the environment is an external impact to this because their Dorsey evidence is clearly more about the affirmative than the alt, and it just says that we need to consult people of color, which is how you can conceptualize the permutation. They say that online gambling is bad because it re-centralizes authority. Online gambling is inevitable. People are doing it illegally. None of our advantages are based off of this, and we're impact-turning capitalism. So I don't really know why any of these matters. They say agency means that we can't solve. We better activate agency, which is above, because they're just a flash in the pan solution, whereas we are constantly looking to parliamentarians in the WTO. Also, debate role-playing activates agency, which means we solve handshot 8. Debate games for private balance of centripetal centrifugal sources of gaming, teaching dialogical philosophies, offers explanation why debate games may be valuable players are expected to experience matches here both relation to an insider and outside perspective. The outside perspective reflects the fundamental aspects of understanding the interaction with other voices. Individuals are able to reach understanding by their voice and ontological process about the ecological common thus by playing debates and as possible to support support students in the process of becoming not only themselves but also in becoming articulate and responsive. Their law arguments, none of them are contextualized in the context of the 1AC. None of them are contextualized in the context of the 1AC. Legalizing gambling doesn't do any of the bad things they talk about. Abandoning the law is worse. It causes nihilistic violence. It means that people like John Yoo just gets to say that it's all arbitrary anyway. Risk drop 9 law offers alternatives. Violence law distinguishes right from right. It becomes important to say what law doesn't show how it exists to show some racist weapons. Especially we might show the rule of law is really different from the rule of the strongest. That there are multiple rules of recognition vary from relationships of legal outcomes with dependent which judges empowered to make the critical distinction. Damascus is not so far off the mark. You wrote monthly LLC under the defense Georgia is doing so. What critics long argue is only possible for any law of this fund. CLS Bob is work. The LLC does construction on the left or not deconstruction on the right. We need to believe the rule of law exists. Each generation must give the Constitution to itself in order for it to be effective. It must become too clever, too quick to notice, and determine even too postmodern to believe ourselves bound. Constitutional theories good for absolutely nothing. We believe in any effort to reduce democracy is futile. Pointless anxiety might have an important indication that we know the way democracy for degree. Fair enough to prove him wrong. Not postmodernism conceals the murder rich, cheerful aplomb. We are determined to have law even if we make it ourselves. That the Constitution. What if a constitutional law did not exist? It would be necessary. It would be necessary to invent it now. The permutation debate is not a property argument. It's a question of competition. We are not taking their strategy. If they need to win, they are better than option than ours, or both. Then they need to win. They're a better option than our strategy, or both. It's logical. They have to prove the app is bad, not just that the counterplan is good. Key decision making skills. New legal theory depends on litigation strategies, which are above, and we're impact turning their consumption and capitalism argument. They don't have anything on the capitalist peace theory, which is like 3 minutes of the 1AC. No serial policy failure because they can perceive that prediction markets are self-correcting.
605.
I'm sorry?
What? But no,
Sorry.
thanks.
Something like wrong with conversation. Which is all your stuff. And separate. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yep.
You just have to specify what you're picking.
Word.
Which I don't actually.
Okay. Start where the 2 and C overview was. And then the 1AR case last.
Overview.
Also, the as it means they can never create a new order, which is the internal link to. They cannot change the way the WTO functions in the status quo. They're not actually able to. It's necessary for a new order first. Structural white supremacy and racial capitalism. Can't understand the way the structures function. The reasons why we represent us into the app. Is that we must map the map way that resistance has been, that way that resistance has been. Militants why stress structures in these. We must have the contextualization as to how. Excuse me. As to how the kind of people. That we will think why is you acting like that way in the first place? The context is always going to be keen out the distinction because of the beginning is all one AR answers as to why it's not the way they can never create a new order because they don't understand the context as to how racialization happens. That the way that property functions, people are able to be the property holders and black white people never in terms of the way they police them, change the way actually changing the ontological converse to create things. This is supported by the Dorsey evidence that I'll get to later now. These are all reasons why we're able to authority because whenever there's all in the world of the app because they still two impacts now that we need to decrease the way functions, which is how we international change is also a reason why we are even if you think we need institutions we are question that we must have agency in order these institutions, which is why understanding the totality of ontology is always going to have to it's also going to key to the one air can see both between the best over the fluidity of whiteness, which is my extension 2NC, which is the reason why the WTO against democratic anarchism is which one better challenges the way the whiteness institutionalizes itself as a reason. Leon is going to be in that benefit. That's the property argument to the app because it means that it leads to black bodies being gambled, especially when this is legalized by the law. That's essentially the law I already did. Let's see, this still assumes that the power of it is one AR extension that it means it's powerful countries. Those that exist in the world of the alternatives have someone telling you what to do, but rather allows for us to enter ontology. If you cannot conceptualize things that it is utopian, we have a need for it because it proves there is no ontology for black bodies in this status quo because we have to do is to come together to understand when we have this is supported by the quantum even if you think we're still able to solve and impact of collective action this is why this is going to be key. All of their quote-unquote indicts to the alt are first off not specific to democratic anarchism, which is the reason why you should refer to this. Second, all of them are reasons why we need to have as does Dorsey. None of them are reasons why we need to have state action, the key distinction. Now, it's too late for ontology arguments. There doesn't assume the racialization or the property arguments that I already did above util. It's able to solve the app that enact. Reason why you still less come chain arguments I did above. The 2 and C answer this part will plus the one links for you to vote negative because they indicate how expands the mindset because it assumes that money and wealth and resources to play with. Just links long arguments that above I'll see gambling is racialized and it functions in a gender context that always is flawed because it does not assume the way those bodies interact with the law, which is why our body knowledge is always going to have to be key and is always going to have to be key. The Leon announced that the above answers back to Delgado now. The agency argument, yeah, I did the agency argument above. All the law good arguments assume the white policing arguments that I did above, and it assumes that then the alternative, and it assumes that there is no alternative to law because it relies on the assumption that we need authority, which is not something that we actually need. This for the quantum evidence on permutation is severance as actionary, but the evidence from the narcissist, their starting point, the perm is consult, and we are the minorities, and we say no, so vote negative. When that, they have to win. They don't have office in democratic anarchism, which means that we are winning to prove that the app is bad. That's are the link arguments. Their self-correcting arguments are reason why the structures maintain themselves as seductionary, but the evidence also going to extend the footnoting to sentence to Robinson evidence indicates that you cannot take black Marxism out of its context, which is the reason why the permutation is never actually able to solve the quantification. This is also going to link that the long evidence indicates that black scholarship only becomes available if white people say it is, which is a reason why the permutation is never actually able to solve because it's an instance of racial capitalization. Case rate. DSRB is on the other floor. It's a question of why the US doesn't comply with the WTO in the first place. Why do we need trade to decrease conflict in the first place? All of these are reasons we need root cause. That's a bacon evidence for the 1 and C. That's instead of the 2 and C.
Okay. 613.
Wait, I'm sorry. How much do we have?
Sorry.
613.
Okay. Now we can start.
I'm sorry?
Got it. Sorry, talk myself. I should probably check your caps.
Makes no sense.
What?
I don't think Nick knows what he's talking about. He's like, you can be advocates in WGP, you know, it's very debating. Too late.
Going on?
Thanks, Nick. I mean, all the other ones are plausible, but I'm just like, what's going on? Sorry. Can you pull it up? Maybe. Yeah. On you now. On me. Yeah.
Okay. Everything else in the city, they WTO is not for everyone mutually and equally submission trade agreements. Definitely WTO, but is global trading that's damning for the British world. And wars are coming down in the U.S. and China and the U.S. and only making good. So that's a ham and evidence is a conceded extinction claim, which is a reason why the affirmative must come first if there's any reason why we are able to spill up now. Trade self inequality. This is completely conceded, even if they wouldn't resolve it. That trade is able to reduce inequality in every single kind of residual impact, which we might that turns in the one are when the inequality impact is extended, communities structurally dispossessed by things like inequality cannot engage in revolution because they're distracted trying to feed their families. That's the link evidence from the two to the top. The activates agency two ways. First is trade. This is not about the U.S. government spilling over to the WTO, but rather it's about creating an effective model of trade activism that is able to monitor day-to-day policymaking. Only the critiques had all other attempts have failed. Massive movements that coalesce around oppositions to one issue, like the plan, like the critique, create heat, but no lasting change. That's proven by things like Battle in Seattle and the Occupy movements, which is what we've been saying throughout the entirety of the debate, which means that we are able to spill over because this debate is about activating critical activism skills, which can be used later. Now, as role-playing activates the agency, even if broader structurals are inaccessible, there's a conceded claim. The debate is, which means that we should learn the kinds of policy expertise that are key to change the status quo. Those do spill over. That's a hang-hodge evidence, and integrating those into our legal strategies is able to create broader forms where we can create a more moral form of legalism. That's the clear evidence from the 2AC. No, it's not about creating an entirely new legal framework. It's about taking our current legal framework and making it better, and that's what he's talking about when he says that now the world and ballot is answered by the 1 AR Murray evidence. Vote for the best option. In this case, whoever saves the most lives with 2 NR is good on turns the case, but very light on external impact, which means they try or die for the affirmative. She drops the framing of the environmental justice link, which says that we need to legislative solutions in order to counteract corporate influence with the environment is an extinction is add to the that's the 1AC or evidence. She says util doesn't matter because black people don't have ontology. 1. This doesn't assume the drop globalization self inequality argument, which makes this framing irrelevant. 2 is ontology doesn't mean that you can't assign equal value to lives. Is worse for everyone if there's massive death from a trade war. She says agency, but the whole top of the 1 AR is a defense to is a defense of our method in simulating the act. The Hancock evidence says that policy simulations allow debates to recreate their political subjectivity in effective ways. The debris evidence says that understanding the intricacies of the trade policy is the only way to alter mechanisms of the WTO, and compared to a flash in the pan, destroy all hierarchy movements. Like the alternative, the clear evidence says that litigation and policy proposers are effective means of creating new legal strategies, which was above. They say that the alt is able to solve, but the 4 reasons she lists at the top are not reasons why the F is unable to solve. It's just a reason why the alt is not the same as the F, which we get. They say that we can't solve because we don't understand why people can see. Now they can see the second level claim that we are able, that smaller nations are able to force larger nations into submission after the alternative because we create meaningful reforms within the WTO, which is to conceded solvency evident argument. Now they cannot solve the alternative, and if the alt seems a little too good to be true, you're not alone. There's no articulation of how it overcomes the war, and our alt fails evidence any reason why their alt doesn't cause a complete restructuring of status quo power structures. Means that all other turns case arguments are non-unique, which means you should vote for the external trade impact versus trade grassroots movement. Failed in the context of trade. I extended this above. Any kind of past movement has been a flash in the plan, but not lasting heat, which is the debris evidence. That's impacted by the Lipsy evidence that says that the WTO is the key form of trade. Now environment, they've conceded 2 cards versus the Monbiot evidence that says any alternative that starts at individual or grassroots movements will be swamped by the corporations, which is just a conceded argument. Yes, you may try your way through this, but you cannot. The corporations control the legislative making process in the that any kind of effective environmentalism must force the government to internalize the cost, which only the affirmative does. They've conceded a top-level claim that we are not the kinds of environmental regulations that their evidence talks about, but rather we are a bottom-up approach where individuals are able to vote and prediction markets about what kinds of regulations we have. And if it is true that people are participating in the alternative, then it is also true that they will participate in the prediction markets, which answers their argument that no one will gamble with their money on prediction markets. They don't have a warrant to sustain this, and our evidence is very good that people will participate in it. And now the second argument, the second piece of evidence they concede is the Kumo evidence. The all cannot spill up because individual environmentalism fails to create a movement. Not enough people will actually tack on to it, which is just a conceded claim. Now, they haven't applied to their critique to our internal link, which was about now law is good and sustainable. It's sustainable creates piecemeal form, which is able to solve that. The Glotto evidence, they conceded all of the warrants, and it says that it's better for minority groups to do piecemeal reform within the law because any other kind of reform results in the government cracking down and just reversing any kind of progress that has occurred. These are articulated in the context of the alternative, which means that you should vote for it. It said that the extent that ordinary evidence ontology doesn't matter, consequences have to be first. That was at the top. It's not new. It's an extension of our framework argument. They say gambling is bad. Obviously, people won't gamble with black people, and also they conceded that gambling is happening in the status quo illegally. The alt doesn't solve because there's still illegal gambling.
Great.
Great.
Alright, cool. So the decision is a 2-1 for the affirmative from Kentucky. I actually said it. So I think that ultimately it comes down to me kind of a question of terminal uniqueness. I think the negative highlights the necessary conditions for creating the possibility of, I guess, collective action, and we'll call it, I suppose, harmony, that is the warrant that's really embedded in a lot of the AF impact cards. I think, for example, when you're discussing, why a trade would stop conflict, your best piece of evidence on this is the Panachadiki evidence, something like that. It says that hostile regional blocks are the reason that intrastate war would occur. But I think that the way that the negative outlines this debate is like, in order to address something like hostility or global hostility, we would need to understand, sort of maybe at an epistemological level, the ways that states create violence and the conditions for violence, and in particular, their Robbins evidence and their Quinn evidence contextualizes that to be that the co-evolution, right, of racial and capitalism creates the very possibility of, I think, violence and hierarchy to begin with, which means that as a slight comment to the neg, I think you could have done a little bit better job of applying this. One thing that's a little frustrating, I think, in evaluating this debate is there's very little warrant application. There's lots of claims that are being made by both sides, and then I think the implicit warrant is supposed to be understood by me. But in digging through some of the evidence, I thought that ultimately, you all could have been a little bit better being like, the reason that trade stops conflict is hostility. Our alternative provides a method or a pathway for understanding hostility because the co-evolution of racism and capitalism underpins global hostile regimes, right? They obviously don't say it in those terms, but on the flip side, I'm not sure that you all say something like the following, group their necessary conditions debate at the top, their Robinson evidence doesn't apply to our trade and hostility argument because the warrant is distinct for the following reasons. I guess you see, and so not having either of those discussions ultimately meant that it's like, well, why would warrant conflict occur? Is the affirmative more or less likely to cause warrant conflict, or should we take a different approach? I guess the way that the negative outlines their alternative as being this approach towards democratic anarchism, right, and the ways that we understand the co-evolution of racism and capitalism. I thought that not really having a lot of pushback on the kind of like racial element also meant that there was kind of a net benefit, right, to the alternative. Maybe something your Delgado evidence is like decent, and your Clare evidence is okay about just like legal structures can change a little bit. I just thought that both in terms of cards and debating the negative was decently ahead on some of these questions. So just a couple of other comments. And I'll let the other two go. But I thought that some of your AF evidence too was dangerously close to like neg evidence, in particular the Mon-Biot evidence you read in the 1NC, where it's just like we need new alternatives to globalization. We just like should sort of understand them in like reference to existing institutions. And this gets to a bit of the cross-ex discussion, right, which is also kind of how I guess my ballot is framed about like whether those institutions, what do they replace, and how do we engage them. But I guess it doesn't seem like, and I think it doesn't really highlight this a lot, but it doesn't seem like you maybe would activate the new type of institution, but rather we're more likely to reinscribe the kind of existing hierarchies. So ultimately for me, what that meant is I think that basically the alternative has a better possibility for addressing kind of like the terminal uniqueness of basically like racial corporatism that creates the possibilities for conflict and war. It was very narrow, but I just thought that the alternative was very able to solve, and that the permutation couldn't address some of those things because of the residual links associated with online gambling and capitalism. So yeah, I guess a stronger push for you all on like the reasons trade causes conflict is this, right? It's distinct from the corporate and racial collusion. That means that there's no possibility for the alternative to access, right? Because they're talking a lot about like we access the root cause of the FMPEG. So. Okay.
I agree with the part where I do, it is perplexing that both sides let the other side not talk about their dominant narrative. The 2AC needs to engage whiteness. The negative needs to engage capitalism. I think there's a fundamental disconnect, and perhaps it seems like from the nodding we're both on the same page. I think the negative is destroying the affirmative on the question of the way the F relates to whiteness. I think the opposite dynamic is true on the dynamic of capitalism. The reason the WTO is a unique cultural institution is because it's the interchange of the way economic authority and state authority function in a way that there's, and I respect Will's commentary, and I think if negative makes Will's commentary, I vote negative without discussion. But here's the difference in the reference. When you say we need to engage in a process that allows the folks in Antigua to articulate what's happening, their argument says not only did the folks in the dispute mechanism allow Antigua to operationalize that, the question of whether the fact that we can't imagine it doesn't provide the mechanism, but the app has already imagined and concretely explained the only way that the people in Antigua get to have power above their socioeconomic status is the dispute mechanism. And there's no discussion. And I think one of the fundamental questions for me is that this debate almost acted as though the section of the 1AC that said trade is the only way to resolve global inequality and conflict did not happen. I mean, it's really, I had to keep looking back because I feel like I missed the 1C section on ontology that really said, like, we can't evaluate any of that, or we can't evaluate studies. And I think fundamentally the 1C is narrow. The 1AC makes a broader claim, and then the affirmative keeps referencing it, and you all don't redefine it. And that may be a different judgment point between the three of us, how we came. But I mean, fundamentally, I think it's a truth claim that is articulated, and I don't believe in debate truth, but when the affirmative says over and over again, that the expansion of globalization, which is the acceleration of global trade, reduces global inequality, I don't really think there's a contestation of that claim. And that's really hard because I don't think the affirmative is contesting your arguments in the top four and the 2NC about why the global way that we've engaged the history of whiteness and capitalism needs to be re-examined. Neither one of those sides is directly being engaged, but
It's like,
But I mean, here's the other part of it is that, I mean, here's to the broader claim. I mean, if I was to ignore this, like, what would be the argument that you think really gets out of the way to say it is undeniable scientific evidence that globalization reduces inequality? And what do you think is your best answer to that?
Well, I guess it was more of like in the 2 hour, my thought was, why is there global inequality in the first place, was how I was framing it, which is why we have to deal with the structures. If they don't have new structures to replace it, then it doesn't matter if trade solves things. Because they still have the institutionalization of the WTO, means there's still authority, means there's still power.
Right, see, that's just the Sullivan's argument. Fundamentally, I mean, you've conceded the impact claim, and your argument is they don't solve. And I'm saying from my standpoint,
does.
well, but this is kind of the discussion. Is it's almost in this debate, like you're saying, we're going to rely that the alt solves as well or as better than the AF for the AF's impact. Whereas to me, you win this debate very easily by saying the impact of whiteness is why you win the debate, and the inability to challenge that. You read it as a case turn. I think that's the fundamental problem. Exactly what you just said is true. You say the alt is a better mechanism to resolve inequality, as been historically articulated through a pattern of capitalism and whiteness. Mm-hmm. That argument is still being framed as a impact turn to their impact, not as a standalone argument, which is why I think you need to win the ontology claim to say it's not about the dollar figures. This is I kept waiting for this discussion to say this can't be solely addressed from the negative standpoint in terms of a balance of trade, because the balance of trade is inevitably going to have consequences that probably disproportionately benefit those in positions of privilege and position of whiteness. I mean, there's no question of that.
You don't think that's like the Leong analysis?
No, I think you're trying to get in that way, but the difficulty of the Leong analysis and other discussion is that you're allowing the debate about the progress of capitalism and the mechanism of an economic system just the same. I think the framing of democratic anarchism is clever, but without an ability to explain what it is and what it's not. I put in my notes of the debate, I think you're right to say that our lack of imagination is a necessary way to describe that, but the next part needs to say, why do we need a system that we can't imagine over one that I can say chapter and verse what it is? That's the reason why your impact has to be distinct. You have to say, in the 2NR, the app is going to sound, I'll try and die on the nature of this, because they're going to say they've identified a problem, identified a solution. The negatives problem has to be broader and more challenging and more perplexing, and the fact that you don't know the exact direction of how the alt would do everything is not the point. The alt's the only mechanism that interrogates whiteness, which is the only way to address this. So my way, part of why I think democratic anarchism was framed in what you wanted to do was to make a macro criticism of capitalism, which is to say there's no way they could be right on the truth claim of the impact.
So you think it should have been, we should just went for a hardcore capitalism root cause, but with the impact of whiteness?
I think that would have been much stronger, because I thought your debating of whiteness was awesome, but I think ultimately you were debating whiteness as an internal turn to their argument as explaining to win the rest of it, and that's why I think in each debate, give you an example. I think the clear example of this in the environment debate, their Mambio cards, I respectfully disagree. I think the cards are awesome and say this is the path that we have, given how close we are to climate change irrevocably destroying the globe. We have the choice to either work as individuals or to take the terrible state institutions we have and try to make them better. And he says, and this is the big comment in the cross-X, say Exxon would love the alt. because Exxon would buy enough time that even if maybe the alt produces, once we reimagine some better form of it, at that point the Antarctic is literally already gone. And that's the way they frame kind of the choice to work with bad institutions. And this is the difficult for me in that same. The only time the debate about, I know it's like cliche, it's so old, even I remember it in debate, like the old right debate, I was waiting for somebody to reference Rorty, it sounded so old and cliche. That only happens in the brief cross-sex, except when the AF is making the argument that it's not about a political right, it's about the economic. In some ways, part of what the AF is doing is almost reading a mechanism about why globalization solves the problems of pure capitalism. And that's why the AF's mechanism of saying the AF engages in a way to give people a way to tell the state what kinds of trade it needs to fix. And so their argument is that the WTO, because Antigua can be.
And at least like, because like there's the 1AC Monbiot evidence and then the 2AC Monbiot evidence that is about the climate change business.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you should say about that in particular is like read their evidence through criticism of what it's deployed in climate change in particular. Because actually your cards were very strong. And so there's one sense in which the Monbiot evidence is like now, so throwing out all ridiculous, it would be. Then your evidence is like, we're actually just gonna like marginal dispossess. So there are two pathways to act on climate change. This pathway, right, where then like gas prices go up and then we don't care what happens. People can't pay for gas anymore. And if you're like, talking about that, it's like, their evidence provides a description, but you should read it in the context of our criticism about the affirmatives approach, right? So is to the used with, right, or fails to analyze some other component, right, of problems, right, that are addressed.
So going back
that's
to
when
the
I struggle
Exxon
with this.
stuff.
Like, you'll have great evidence, and they've got some like good evidence on this question. It's like whether we act now and act in like favor of state action, etc. Whether that's more likely to solve the terminal problem, of trade conflicts and climate change and environmental, problems, or whether we take a step back, reorient our epistemological and ontological understandings towards those state structures and their very composition, right, as grounded in both capitalism and racialized hierarchy. Like, you know what I mean? But without conversation between those two things, it's very difficult, I think, sometimes to.
I have a question about the Exxon example that you're given. Why is that a symptom of capitalism's nature to be able to restructure itself, like impacted by the Leon stuff? So like so their claim is that the Exxon movements would love just like straight up movements because they can still. It takes a lot of time to be able to counter that, right? Which is the reason why like legal structures are necessary.
Agency.
Yeah. So why isn't that the Leon evidence a reason why that logic is rooted in like the focus on the law? So like the Leon evidence says that when you rely on that, it allows for the ownership and property stuff, which is an example of the Exxon stuff, right? So
but that's basically you're making. I mean, when you make that broad argument, it's a critique of capitalism. And so basically the alt has to say that a rejection of the notion of private property and ownership, because the reason why they're referencing is to say Exxon gets regulated by the AF because Antigua can stop Exxon. I mean, you're making a root cause argument, and they're making a solvency argument, and the alt would have to dislodge capitalism, which begs the broader question: why in the first place?
wait, why doesn't the alternative dislodge capitalism?
It has to, which is
Yeah, I know. My question is, why doesn't it? What is their reason for why it doesn't?
No, their impact turning. They've read 3 minutes impact turns. They agree with that. Capitalism is good. They're overwhelmingly contending the problems.
I just got confused. Capitalism is good, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Super
Why?
good.
Okay. Good. I just
Yeah.
clarifying with you. I was taking steps with you. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's what I said. And their primary argument is that the mechanism of the WTO is the mechanism for improving the problems of capitalism, which isn't discussed, which is the reason why the dispute mechanism is so important. They say if you think, and that's why the Dorsey evidence and the debate about, because the problem in the Dorsey debate, and this is why the argument becomes really, that's one of the best points of contestation. Both teams are reading the evidence to say Dorsey's describing, it seems like a world in which the policymaking decision is not truly reflective of the needs of communities that have dispossessed them, which is the reason they read it to say, how else do you think a country or people like Antigua, who have no cultural political power, get to have any influence in the world, if not in the mechanism of the WTO? Which is the reason why they specifically reference it in that context.
Yeah, me
Also-
too. Well, I was gonna let everybody go before I ask questions.
Yeah, and then I'm sorry, I've also cut this down.
Sure.
So.
I'm going to say two quick things at the top. I guess I'm going to jump into this Monbiot evidence, sort of bridge the divide, which is I think that Monbiot is probably an AF card when it's written, but that's like 8 years ago. To the point that there is any way that cap solves warming at this point. I think this is where the negative is one of the places that the negative can easily win this debate. And I don't mean like Naomi Klein kinds of Ev, but maybe I do in terms of we must end capitalism in order to solve warming in the first place, which fixes most of these problems. Yeah, it is rare that I vote affirmative with no permutation that's even remotely legitimate, but I think this is one of those instances. I think the neg's absence of better impact defense or a better impact writ large, it makes it really hard for me to decide anything but affirmative. I don't think that the AF wins perm, but it stops extinction, so who cares? Neither team is awesome on the roll of the ballot claim. By the end of the debate, I think the neg is way ahead on the roll of the ballot claims until the 2 and R, in which you sort of rely on the, well, that's new claim, except I think that most of those are simply an answer to a fleshing out of it, are an extension of the 1AR, which is an answer to the 2NC, which is the first time that you fleshed out the role of the ballot as anything other than a one-sentence assertion of, this is the role of the ballot. Like, in a world where that's actually fleshed out for why that's best for education, or how we evaluate the role of the ballot, or how that makes sense in the 1NC, I think I'm willing to give the 2 and R the nope, that's new. You don't get to finally make your ontology args there. But the first time that actually gets fleshed out as a real arg, I think happens in the block. I think the neg is winning that the alt solves all of the neg args, but I have trouble conceptualizing any way that the alt solves the AF. I mean, their arg is straight up regulated cap, awesome. It stops extinction multiple ways, vote AF judge. I kept thinking that there was going to be more cap bad cards or some cap bad cards at the extinction level, and I even hear just mean like cap inevitably leads to extinction, 1 or 2 of these, and I've got enough to hang my hat on and vote neg, because I think you're crushing them on the racial implications of how this how this works, and I think this gets to a bunch of the things that Will's talking about as terms of epistemological critiques of the foundation of the AF claims that they're making, but I was maybe just looking for some way more game on either the case in the vein of like, the AF is just a discursive guise for capitalism. Nothing that they're describing will actually happen. This is simply the way that we justify the continuation of capitalism, or we are not going to debate in the land of that world because we don't have access to it. It's only about our representations of it, or they are an inaccurate representation of that world, or more Afro-pessimism, non-white folks are already dead in the world of whiteness, which means extinction claims are irrelevant. Or just cap bad. Any of these things are things that I can easily vote neg on, but the way that it exists as I saw the debate without doing the kind of 2 and R work that I think Will's 2 and R represented, means that I don't know how to vote anything but affirmative, if that makes sense.
Sure. I think there's just I'm assuming that Vita and I are on the same page, but I was not getting cap good.
Yeah.
Is my issue. So
Okay.
Yeah, it's more like WTO key to regulate the excesses of capitalism.
Right. Which
Right.
yeah. So my thinking was I'm going for WTO bad in my head because I saw the AF as WTO good, not as cap good. So I just need to reframe, I guess.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, you could have more, discussion of like the WTO specifically. It's just like, who set up the institution? Why would we read their Monbiot evidence? And you stack it up next to our cards that are like, when we approach climate change, for example, we would say, oh, well, the institution that was set up by these, communities that created the global order, right, of racialized
Right. It was a
capitalism.
rigged system
Yeah,
in
to
the
begin
first
with. So why would we
place?
use the WTO? It's like, they're the cards
Right.
that they're writing. They're like, the only way we can solve is to use the WTO. Well, that's what our argument is about. It's like, we rigged the system. So why would
Right.
we use the rigged system, like address the rigged system?
Yeah.
Obviously, the rigged system will say that the only
Like-
way to solve is to use the rigged system.
Like, this is one of those instances where like I'm agreeing.
That's why it's so circular.
Just a
Like,
truth level claim with like
Yeah.
2/3 of the things that the neg is saying, and disagreeing strongly with like 2/3 of the things that the affirmative are saying, and yet have no problem at all checking in for the AF on these claims. If that makes sense.
So we
Yeah,
need.
it's a
Also, don't forget to extend the
a friction.
extinction via the tech advances to who they are. Maybe
Yeah.
that was one of the, maybe you
Extra tech
blipped
advances, yeah.
real
Fair.
fast, but
Yeah.
I
I would
like you skipped over
I would
tech
vote
the
on
tech
tech
extinction. I was just
advances,
like,
Okay.
oh, maybe
It's
I'll go
insulated
vote neg
from-
then. We
it's
don't
like
need to
hierarchy.
roll the ballot claim.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, like tech
you-
advances as insulated from the creation of hierarchies.
Yeah, like you've got
those
an
are
entire
irrelevant, I would
separate
yeah.
dropped advantage. You're just like, I'm gonna make this 2AR a little bit more difficult for myself. That would be too easy. And you've got to have better game on in the 2AC on the roll of the ballot claims. If that 1 NC has another 2 sentences on why that roll of the ballot is good, I'm strongly considering checking in on the neg simply on, I don't know why your stuff is relevant. The only thing that matters is that roll of the ballot. Your 2AC is borderline completely non-responsive to their roll of the ballot, to the point where I'm willing to be like, yeah, extinction, who cares? This is not how we're deciding this round. That's flagged in the 1NC, that's how I'm voting, kinds of things.
Okay. But I think part of why that doesn't, and this is the part, I think even the structure of the 1NC, like, I mean, you said you thought it was WTO bad. I thought I was right in this. The 1NC, the initial link starts with the liberalization. Gaming is about capitalist exploitation. I mean, the 1NC framing kind of, and this is, I think, the part that is difficult. I don't almost in some ways think that your discussion of gaming or gambling when it happens really is illustrative at all. Because it almost just kind of say, is it like a representative anecdote for, I mean, I almost asked the question, it seems like we're just operating under the premise that the alternative would make any form of gambling unethically unsustainable because it would be gambling in people's lives, sustainability, all the link arguments you make. But it's really not even a representative anecdote that kind of helps frame it, where that, to the broader point, could be to say, that's the reason why these are incompatible. Because the form of capitalism that the AF embraces is ultimately one that devalues individual people to be that you could gamble with, whether it's their mortgages or their direct lives or their well-being. But I think that's kind of a way you think the initial part of the 1NC, and I'm glad you referenced it because I went back and reviewed the Leong evidence. It's a great argument. Remember the way that you all are framing the Leong argument is about why legalism reinscribes the notion of whiteness, which broadens the broader question, which is, but is it about, because every time I reference it, you say, well, but it's about cap. And I said, but this is the broader dynamic. What's now the relationship of what is the state of legalism in a world where we need trade, whatever we're going to call regulation or law to address it? And that's one of the areas when you all keep saying we don't need authority, we don't need, that we have to kind of reject that notion that there has to be a predetermined hierarchy. That's where they always push back and say, if we don't have an international way to resolve trade disputes, how does that function?
So we need a distinction between the use of the law as it. So like the Leong evidence is supposed to be a critique of law and the status quo that is entrenched within capitalism,
Right.
not law in general. So like that's the...
So that 1NC state bad card means that I don't know why you're trying to make those distinctions, right? Your democratic anarchism is literally, I mean, and you should be making this bounce back. They can't possibly solve the app. This will be exclusively a cap good, cap bad debate. Otherwise, their links are all non-unique in the first place. Because you start out with it's the state that will always attempt to reinscribe the capitalist order in the first place. I mean, I was very confused by the 1NC only because I was like, well, where's the cap leads to extinction card? I don't understand.
We talked about that.
we talked about that
but
before, right?
it goes back to the we are on different pages about what the app was doing.
Yeah,
It's like an interlink.
Yeah, literally either needed a cap leads to extinction,
Or trade bad.
or trade bad, or race is more important than any of these things. Any of these are ways to win this debate.
So you think the 2NR should have started with the 3 things up top, and then to be a reason why, and then like a impact comparison of like when it. So then
I think that those 3 things should have been on the case, so that the case is not undercovered. Literally, like. This isn't just a way to understand the round. This is a way to understand all of their evidence. If we don't have specific case cards, who cares? That's not relevant. Every claim that they made, it has to be filtered through an understanding of, yeah, cap is awesome. For who exactly? Rich white folks? So? They continue a rich white folk system. Awesome for rich white folks. How does that mean Antigua actually ever gets any real power in the world? You give them the appearance of power? You're going to start giving them a UN voting veto? No. At best they can hope for is we don't screw them over more than they're already being screwed over. Does that make sense? And then all of their we solve extinction claims get called into question with an epistemology critique of all of those claims that I don't think they have much defense for at the end. When you just make it a cap good, cap bad debate, they can just out-attack you on cap's awesome. Vote out, Judge. And I can check
which
it
is
out.
Well, that's the problem.
which
That
is
we didn't know that was the debate.
because-
That's- we were making it, but okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, good luck, y'all.
Thank you.